Let's go.
1, 2, 3.
What's up, RotoViz?
Into the RotoViz Fantasy Football Show. I'm Dave Caban alongside Curtis Patrick. We're two of the owners here at RotoViz, and we are pumped up because tonight we have a special guest with us. We are going to talk through a number of prospects, talk through some mock drafts, and then get a look into the trade that went down earlier this week between Seattle and Denver. So we are very pleased to bring back Danny Kelly of The Ringer. You can find his work there writing about the NFL, the draft, fantasy football. He also co-hosts The Ringer Fantasy Football Show. Danny, it's great to have you back. Last time you were on, we talked about Philadelphia for a while. A lot has transpired since then, and I'm really now excited to talk to you about the Seahawks later on. But how's it going, man?
It's going pretty well. It's pretty well. I appreciate you guys having me on again. Always enjoy your pod. It's weird hearing the intro music in regular speed because I'm normally like listening on 2x. I'm like, whoa, this is a good jam. It's all slowed down. But yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Dave, I broke out the good stuff for Danny tonight. This is Booker's Bourbon. This is Granny's batch from 2020. It's 126.4 proof. Yeah, when Danny stops by, you get out a nice pour. So Ryan McDowell picked that up for me.
Nice.
Last time I was in Kentucky. So yeah. Anyway, let's get into it with Danny here.
And we should note this is Danny's intro music, or is that his theme music? I don't know if
that's his theme music. That just exudes like Danny's positive, like, you know, just I don't know. When I heard that, I felt like that's just Danny bouncing along, having a good time, talking about fantasy football.
I think that makes sense. I get it.
Let's get into the show sheet, Dave.
All right, let's do it. So we are going to start off. Danny has spent a lot of time working through just a really, really sweet looking rookie guide, going through mocks. I want to get his high level opinion on this class when we kind of think of it from the lens of the positions that are going to be relevant in fantasy football, in comparison maybe to like the last 5 or so classes. Like if you had to, put an adjective on this one, like good, bad, neutral, where would you put it?
Deep, I would say.
Deep. Okay. I like it.
I think it's obviously not, I don't think it has quite as high level prospects at the very top. So it's not top heavy, but I'm just like looking at some of the guys that you can get in round 3 right now. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of nice. I'm actually kind of excited about this. Obviously a lot will change once the draft hits and we see how late some of these guys go. But as it looks right now, like I'm excited about 3rd round picks. I think that's a good sign. And for the depth of this class, I think there's quite a few like running back sleepers that might pan out. And then obviously the receiver class is really deep and no one seems to have any consensus on it. So you might find some value there. So yeah, overall, I'm pretty excited about it.
Awesome. We always like to hear about that depth, and it's always exciting too when there might be some running back sleepers hanging around. But I do want to start here with a more well-known player, and that's Drake London. I'm curious as to, I guess, if you think that he should be the first wide receiver to go in the draft, and then where you would like to see him go, and if you think that's actually in play.
Oh, that's a good question. So right now I've got Treylon Burks as my number 1 receiver, but right behind him, I've got London. And so like, should he go first? I don't have like a strong opinion that Burks are over London because they're kind of different styles guys, right? Like London is a prototypical X type receiver. I think Burks has spent most of his time in the slot. He does line up outside a little bit, but he's more of like a slot Deebo Samuel-esque type player where you're moving him around the formation. London is more like that prototype X type guy, that red zone threat, the possession receiver type player. So I kind of get the suspicion now based on like what happened at the combine that London's going to be the top guy to go off the board. It just feels like the NFL really likes him. He didn't do anything to hurt himself at the combine because he didn't run. It'll be interesting to see what he runs at his pro day if he does run. But he looks to me like a top 10 pick. I could see him going to the Falcons. In fact, I have him mocked to the Falcons in my latest mock draft. I think that would make a lot of sense. They have like no receivers right now, and getting Matt Ryan, if they want to compete with Matt Ryan in the final couple of years of Matt Ryan's contract, which they're kind of stuck with right now, unless someone wants to go trade for him, it would make a lot of sense to me for them to go get him. I mean, he would make sense for the Browns. I'm like reticent to say that because I don't really want him to go to the Browns. Or like the Eagles, who apparently were in on Calvin Ridley before he got suspended for the season. It sounds like they're going to be looking for more help at receiver. That makes a lot of sense for them. And then obviously the Saints, need more weaponry depending on what they do at the quarterback spot. So there's a lot of teams in the top 15 that it really wouldn't surprise me if they went and got Drake London.
I mean, so Dave, the shades of is one of the coolest parts of Danny's mocks. And if you guys have never checked out Danny's mocks, you can check them out, nfldraft.theringer.com. We'll be sure to tweet that out. But he's got Drake London, shades of Slim Mike Evans with Dennis Rodman. I mean, how cool.
I love that.
I want to have him on every roster now. But Danny, I mean, you make a great point too. The Falcons are extremely. I mean, they're in a really bad spot here, where they basically have to invest in Ryan, or just chalk this up as a wasted season. The NFC South is going to be very winnable, and I love the note Matt Ryan getting him another big-bodied player. I mean, I would hate to have to line up a defense across from Drake London and Kyle Pitts, a couple of Redwoods out there just doing all kinds of damage. So I really like this spot. Anything you want to add there, Dave?
I don't really have too much to add other than when I see a player getting compared to Dennis Rodman at the wide receiver position, I find that very exciting. That I think about the Falcons roster and I get really excited about what could happen. You pair him up with Kyle Pitts for Matt Ryan. I think it could be pretty fun. Oh yeah. So if we continue along in your mock, though, Danny, I'm curious about this. Malik Willis is the next player in a fantasy relevant position that makes his way into here. Clearly, the hype has been rising on him.
Yep.
Do you think that it's justified? Should there be all this excitement swelling around him like there is?
I do. I think so. Obviously, you have to have a little bit of disconnect between fantasy football and reality football. It's the same discussion we're having, I think, with Jalen Hurts, who was probably a little bit more polished, a little more accomplished as a passer coming into the NFL. But I think Willis has better tools. He's faster. He's more explosive as a runner. So you give a little bit up there, but you take some back as a runner. I think Willis is the kind of guy who can come in and rush for, 800 plus 900 yards in a season, plus a bunch of touchdowns, because he has that ability on the ground. And he's like, so explosive, such a natural runner. I've been saying I think he'd probably be the second best runner in the NFL at quarterback behind Lamar Jackson when he comes in. I mean, I guess Hurts would be the other one he's competing with. Who else are we talking about here? Because I think he just has that explosiveness and speed. I've been, I read on The Athletic, I think he was running like 4.3s. I'm not sure he's actually that fast, but when you're in that ballpark, he's going to do a lot of damage on the ground. And so, of course, landing spot's important. And of course, before the draft, it's hard to really put a value on him, but he's the one quarterback in this class that I'm actually excited about taking a chance on. I would say that just because I think that rushing upside is so huge. And he's probably, if he is a first round pick, if he's like a top 15 pick, which it's sounding and feeling like he's going to be, I mean, he's going to get 3 years in the league at least. So obviously you're going to have question marks down the line. I think it's going to be the same deal probably that we're having with Jalen Hurts right now. We're in the dynasty community. People are still not really sure if they're supposed to buy in to this guy, but in the short term, in a 3-year window, I think he could be a top 5 fantasy receiver or quarterback because of the rushing upside. So that's the reason I'm excited about him. And of course it depends on where he lands.
So I'd like to clarify here a little bit. You say people in the dynasty community aren't sold on Jalen Hurts. That's people excluding me because I've been in on Hurts. Monolith. Yeah, exactly. I've been in on Hurts all along, but I mean, I love this. Yeah. And I think that the cross check that I have for you here is, I mean, is Willis in consideration in the Superflex 101 spot for you in those rookie drafts because of the upside? Because we're having trouble getting him all the way there in our RotoViz ownership team mocks. It just seems like the highest we've been able to push him is 3rd, and nobody's been willing to take him 1 overall.
Yeah, I think that's where I am too.
Okay.
I think it just depends on your league, of course, because some teams are going to have a stronger need at at quarterback. And so maybe they'll be willing. It's kind of like how we saw Kyle Pitts be the 101 in some super flex leagues last year, even though it wasn't necessarily like the rational thing to do. It's like you get so excited about a guy that he becomes the 101 over some quarterbacks, and maybe that was actually the right choice based on what happened with some of these rookie quarterbacks last year. So we'll see. But I think, right now I would have him penciled in at number 3. I still would go probably Brees 1, Burks 2, even though Burks, I guess, is kind of like, losing some of his luster, I guess, based on his not super exciting numbers, even though I think they were still pretty good numbers, but like they weren't what people were expecting kind of deal. So I don't know. What do you not have? You don't have Burks at number 2 then? Was that the audible?
He's still going 1 or 2 in our drafts, except for the one draft where Mr. Dave Caven took Garrett Wilson at the 1. So we're doing 6 mocks, kind of mixing up our order and creating some internal RotoViz analyst ADP, and Dave throwing in the
curveball,
the wild card there. But I love it. I mean, it's nice to have conviction even at the top of a draft there, but for the most part, I think that's pretty much the consensus is Willis, Burks, and Hall in some sort of order for Superflex. And that's a natural transition point. Dave, I know you wanted to hit Treylon, and Danny says Treylon Burks has shades of Deebo Samuel with a power-up mushroom, which I absolutely love. Danny notes, he's got field tilting speed. I love the comment about him not necessarily being, a prototypical X, because I think people see the size. And if you didn't watch a lot of college football, you just see, 6'2", 225, see all these stats, and you just kind of make an assumption. But yeah, this is like, I think he could be really, I would love to see a Terrell Owens type outcome where, he's moving around the formation, and man, if you just give him the ball at 8 to 12 yards deep, it's just murder for defenses. So I'm very excited about what Burks could do, but it was a little disappointing to not see him, post DK type speed numbers.
I think, and I think people will kind of get over that as we go further along in the process. Maybe like it'll be less fresh, and then we'll get back to like the numbers, the profile. Everything kind of points to him being one of the top receivers taken in the draft. Obviously there's always going to be worries, and maybe he isn't as lock solid as some of the guys that we've had in recent years, but I'm still pretty confident. I had sort of like that crisis of faith, I think, during the combine, where it was like, man, am I like locking on this guy and just, it's so hard. There's so many like it's a minefield when you're going through the pre-draft process and trying to decide what matters. And, trying not to succumb to groupthink, but also like the wisdom of crowds sometimes is correct. It's like hard to like walk that line. And so right now I'm definitely like holding strong on Burks as wide receiver 1, but during the combine, there's a lot of people who are just like, oh, this is not good, man. Like he's definitely not as explosive. And when you're not very refined as a route runner, like if you're living on that explosiveness, when you come into the NFL, it's going to be like that much harder. So I think there's definitely something to, those arguments, but I'm still just kind of like holding strong and believing.
The week leading up to the combine is basically, okay, I'm not going to pay attention to this. Age, production, draft capital, age, production, draft capital, age, production, draft capital. Oh crap, he's 2/10 slower than I thought. What do I do now? And so it is such just it's torturous. But I love a couple of the other notes in the scouting report, Dave, here before you respond. Danny notes that Treylon wears size 5XL gloves, which is, I would consider that an extraordinary physical trait. Bench press is almost 400 pounds, squats over 500, power cleans 320. As a power lifting aficionado myself, I have mad respect for that. Very difficult to do that at 6'2". And, playing in the SEC, we've seen, the players who produce at this type of level in the SEC, you are, over the course of time, if you were to draft them at ADP or even above, you're going to come out ahead in your dynasty draft. So that's the thing, man. I mean, I made an adjustment mistake on AJ Brown. I made an adjustment mistake even on DK after it looked like, he was basically a shopping cart going around the cones in his combine. And I'm just not making the mistake again.
What was your adjustment for AJ Brown? Because I actually think
landing
profile
spot
wise and
spot.
Okay.
Yeah. A different type of mistake. Yeah.
Because I was like, just as you were talking, I'm going back and reading my scouting report on AJ Brown, and literally like the top level description I've got: aggressive and productive slot receiver.
Yeah.
Like he played in the slot in college. I know that that's like a similar thing with the Burks thing. It's like, oh, can he only play in the slot? But like sometimes you have to project these guys with very good physical traits, great size, and Burks is very aggressive, like physical. He's not going to back down. He goes up and wins at the catch point. Like there's all these very good, encouraging, positive traits. And I think I saw, and forgive me because I saw this on Twitter. I can't remember who tweeted it, but basically I think he ran like 30% of his routes outside this last season, and he was like 5-something yards per route on the outside, which is like unheard of. Yeah. So I think he's got the ability to like play all over the formation. Of course, it is a risk. It is a like you have to project that at the next level. But of course, everybody's getting scared right now, and so I'm just trying to like hold strong and be like, look, I see this guy, I watch this guy, I get super excited. I think he's got all the traits, and he honestly kind of looks like a carbon copy of AJ Brown, slightly less explosive, I guess, but like not much.
But I think he seems to have better agility. Like I think Treylon's like a more fluid athlete than AJ Brown. We're gonna totally alienate the RotoViz audience talking about this type of stuff. We better move on. Dave is salivating because I think he sees who is here at 11 in your mock draft. Dave, why don't you take this one? Because I know this is your guy.
Yes. So we have Garrett Wilson here in your mock going to the Commanders, which makes me happy because earlier in the week, Curtis and I were joking about how, the last thing I want to have happen is Wilson go to the Jets. Right. So at this point, things are still kind of in flux for the Commanders. Let's say that this scenario happens and Wilson goes there. Is that something that I need to be worried about? Would we actually rather him go to the Jets? I guess maybe speak about him. And if you want to pull in Burks here too, about if you think that either of these guys really need to find themselves in the right situation or if a bad situation could ruin them.
Okay.
Ruin is a strong word. I think the worry I have is that you end up kind of like a Jerry Jeudy situation where 2 years from now, like these guys land somewhere bad or whatever with a bad quarterback or a bad offense, a slow offense, a low volume offense. Like that's going to be Washington. That's going to be New York probably. And then 2 years from now, we're like, I don't know. He hasn't really taken the jump yet kind of deal. But I don't think they're ruined. And I do think Garrett Wilson is comparable, I guess, as a prospect to Jerry Jeudy. I think maybe even better. I haven't looked at like the one-to-one comps in terms of like analytics, but like Garrett Wilson, extremely explosive, extremely sudden as a route runner, really productive, has the pedigree, has the production. I don't know. It's like there's just a ton to like here. Some of the tape guys are a little bit down on him, I guess, but I think overall he reminded me of like a better version of Kadarius Toney. I compared him to Odell Beckham, but
on Red Bull, mind you.
Yeah, he's a little frenetic. He's really sudden, and he gets out of control at times. But I think overall, just that style of player.
Hey, Danny, would you care to guess who his number one sim player in the RotoViz Prospect Box Score Scout is? You've said this name multiple times since we started talking about Wilson. I think you're going to feel very redeemed. It is Jerry Jeudy. Wow. He's a 94% sim score match for Jerry Jeudy if he goes at 11. Other names that come to mind in his top 10, just to let you kind of have this sink in on the analytics: Percy Harvin, Jalen Waddle, Tavon Austin, Ted Ginn, OBJ shows up there in the top 7. Nelson Aguilar, Brandon Cooks, Henry Ruggs, Corey Coleman. That's his top 10.
Yeah. So there's obviously some misses in there, but there's some really good ones too. Yeah. I do think landing. It's funny that we were just talking about AJ Brown because I do think landing spot does matter for some of these guys, and getting with a quarterback does matter. Like DK Metcalf landing with Russell Wilson was huge. It was huge for him. And I think things would have been really different if he landed somewhere else potentially. And then, of course, Justin Jefferson, I think, is sort of the opposite. Like him landing with Minnesota, I don't think anyone was really all that excited, and it's been like perfect for him. Like for whatever reason, Kirk Cousins is feeding the guy, and that's great. And I kind of want Kirk Cousins to stay there forever. But
Yeah.
it's very difficult to predict these things. I think because I remember when Jefferson landed in Minnesota, it was like, oh, that's, at least in my opinion, I was like, oh, that's not very exciting because they're sort of like a balanced team, or at least they had been. And I'm not a huge Kirk fan, so it's hard to predict exactly how it'll go.
So I'm going to pop in now here, Curtis, and ask this question. I don't even care if you had another direction we have to go, because I'm looking at this mock and I am seeing two other quarterbacks going, and I'm not seeing Sam Howell showing up anywhere in this mock. So Danny, can you explain to me what is going on here? I'm not questioning your mock. I'm
number one. What is your problem? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to understand why.
Number one, how dare you?
Yes.
Yes.
Like why is that? I look at the college production in comparison to these other quarterbacks. I read about his versatility as an athlete as well as a passer, and it just kind of is, I'm having trouble getting my head around this. What's going on here?
So I think the Howell thing is interesting because I think the NFL is going to be all over the place on this guy. I mean, I'm sure there's some people that have him as their QB, maybe not QB1, but QB2 or 3. And then I know that there are going to be some teams that see him as like a second or third rounder. I don't think he doesn't have good size. I don't really like him, to be totally honest. Like I could end up being totally wrong on that. I acknowledge that. I think evaluating quarterbacks is like one of the hardest things ever. So I'm just like throwing that out there. I just didn't really like him on tape. Like his feet don't match up with where he's throwing too much. His decision-making was a little bit off at times. He took off from the pocket. He gets sacked a ton. And I don't really actually think his rushing ability is quite to the level. It's certainly not to the level of like a Willis. I'd way rather have Willis and some of the potential downside stuff that comes with him as a passer than I would with Howell, who I think is a tough runner, but I'd like comp him more as like a runner to like a Kyle Juszczyk versus like he reminds me, the way he runs, it reminds me of Kyle Juszczyk. I don't know why, just like his gait,
when we post this, can we just can we make the title Sam Howell is the arbitrage Kyle
definitely.
So I'm sure I'm probably gonna regret this segment, but like I don't know, I just didn't like him when I watched him, and from what I've been hearing, it's like teams are all over the place on him. He's a little bit, he's smaller, obviously. I don't think his arm is all that strong when he's trying to throw off platform. He's definitely aggressive downfield, and his stats are incredible. So those would be the huge counter arguments to me. And I think analytically, as you pointed out, he's like probably the best quarterback in this class. So it's hard for me to kind of like, marry those things two together, because I just didn't really like him when I watched him.
Right. And I think that makes sense. And that probably does speak to why I'm not seeing him as high as I would expect when you have people factoring in a variety of things. But you do have two other quarterbacks going in round 1. So Kenny Pickett, Matt Corral. Out of those guys, do you view either of them as players that have the potential to be elite passers in the league? I know you have Corral going to the Saints. How might that impact the future around where the team surrounding these players?
Yeah. So I think in my actual rankings, I've got it Pickett and then Willis right next to each other, and then I've got Ritter and then Corral, I believe. And so I don't, I'm not like super high on Corral either. Him and Howell kind of like remind me of each other in the sense that like they're both a little bit shorter than you want. I don't know if either has elite physical traits. I know that people like Corral's arm, and I think that's fair. But like he has a smaller frame. He took a beating in college in terms of when he was running. So I don't know if you necessarily want him running a ton. And he reminds me, and this is not necessarily like a one-to-one comp, but like stylistically, he reminds me a little bit of Tua in the sense that like they ran like an incredible amount of RPOs. That was like their offense is RPOs. And so you're going to have to come in and at least early, probably like design an offense that's very RPO based. And that we saw some of the issues that Miami had with Tua. And I think Tua is probably not as gifted physically in terms of like his ability to throw off platforms. So that might be what sets Corral like above a guy like Tua. But I think I'm a little spooked about the fast processing guys, the undersized guys like Tua and Corral, and Howell. I think actually Howell and Tua are somewhat similar too, in the sense that like I just don't like they don't have the off-platform, out of structure playmaking ability that I look at, and like Kenny Pickett is really good at that. Kenny Pickett's really good out of structure, and so I think all of these quarterbacks, generally speaking, have sort of major flaws, but also traits that they can like basically overcome these flaws. It's just a matter of landing spot and development and things like that. It just makes me nervous. I think that's kind of like the bottom line.
Well, if Corral goes to New Orleans, I mean, he's going to have Slant Boy there, so you know we can
That's
make
true.
those quick. We can make those quick throws, quick dump offs to Alvin Kamara. I like the note about off platform because stylistically, Corral to me seems like a C+ version of Mahomes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just because he'll kind of try anything, I guess.
Yeah.
And you know, two other quarterbacks that come to mind, you know, maybe that just make you like frustrated to watch, but you're also like, man, that was really cool. Chad Kelly and Zach,
Oh, boy.
yeah, but without the breaking and entering history. And then Zach Wilson, actually, I think I see a little bit of Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
Corral.
Yeah. I think those are both fair. I have seen him comp to Zach Wilson. I think Wilson's arm was just more naturally like slingshotty or whatever the word is. Like, you know how like Aaron Rodgers just
jumps,
flick of the wrist. Yeah, like jumps off your hand. Like I think Wilson has more of that than Corral. And you know, again, evaluating quarterbacks, there's so many variables. Landing spot's gonna be huge. I want to like stress that a lot. Landing spot is huge for me in quarterbacks because when you get a system that you're surrounded by good players, it's obviously going to help you a lot. We saw what happened with Trevor Lawrence last year. We saw what happened with Zach Wilson. You know, so I think that those are big, huge variables that are probably going to make me feel better about these guys or worse as we get like done with the draft. So I think that's just kind of like where I am right now.
What's kind of cool with the three landing spots that you have for these quarterbacks, and I mean, obviously Seattle's near and dear to your heart, and it's been a frustrating situation for many watching, you know, wishing that it was different with Russell Wilson over the course of his career. But really, when you think about the Seahawks, when you think about the Saints, when you think about the Steelers, those are all stable franchises.
Yeah,
you know, the Seahawks have a history of giving the job to the best guy. The Steelers are the most patient organization probably in any professional sporting history. Yeah. And you know, the Saints, I mean, yes, they have a transition away from Peyton, but they have a good surrounding cast for a young quarterback coming in. And they did try to get some stability by, you know, promoting from within from the coaching staff for the permanent head coaching job. So I just really think, I mean, it's kind of the optimal for all three of these guys being, you know, somewhat subpar compared to some really high end classes in the last 5 to 10 years. If these are the three landing spots in the first round, I'm pretty excited about that.
I am too. I think, and that probably played into how I did the mock because I'm always kind of like got the dynasty like angle in my mind. So maybe this actually doesn't happen, but I think there are like the Steelers have certainly been connected with Kenny Pickett. He's from, you know, Pitt. He's from that area, local kid. The Seahawks, I think stylistically, it makes a ton of sense for them to go with Malik Willis. I don't know if they're going to be quite ready to take a top 10 quarterback right now. I don't know like what their plan is. Obviously they're going to explore free agency and trades and stuff, but you know, this is an opportunity for them to grab a guy that could play a similar style offense, I think, as what Russell Wilson did early in his career, where it's like a read option, bootleg stuff, you know, making stuff happen out of structure, which is Willis's forte. And then you kind of take the good with the bad, you know, because he's clearly going to need some development and all that stuff. But I think like skill set wise, he could probably play that style of role.
Yeah, and anybody can give Rashad Penny 400 touches. So who else do you want to hit here, Dave? I mean, we're actually almost all the way through. You know, I know Danny's got a heart out here in about
so I actually want to transition. There's more wide receivers I'd love to ask about, but I've got to get his take on the Russell Wilson trade. I want to hear if I were a Seahawks fan, how I should be feeling about this, and then maybe what he thinks this means for the Broncos offensive players and their outlook, and then if there's a negative impact on the side of Seattle for the wide receivers.
So I I wouldn't presume to tell Seahawks fans how they feel. Here's how I feel. My first reaction was like, holy crap, they actually traded him. That is wild. I can't actually believe it happened, because I know we've been talking about it for honestly 2 years now, almost. It feels like, are they going to trade Russell Wilson? Are they going to do it? No, they're not going to do it. Maybe they're going to do it. I don't know. Who knows? And then they actually did it. Like, I can't believe they pulled the trigger on this trade. So that was like my first reaction, was like, holy crap, they actually did it. And then if I'm being like completely honest, as someone who covered the team, for Field Goals, the SB Nation blog, early on in the Pete Carroll, John Schneider era, I started in 2011, I think, or 2012, like right before Russell Wilson came around. And I've kind of got to do the whole team building thing with Pete Carroll and John Schneider. And honestly, like, as someone who digs in deep to all this stuff, it's really kind of interesting and fun. They're probably not going to be as good, like, just flat out. Russell Wilson's a really good quarterback, and you need a really good quarterback to win in the NFL. But it's also just straight up going to be fascinating, I think, to see kind of like how they do this. They're going to have, going into this year, I think they have like almost 50 million in cap space. And then next year in 2023, I was looking at over the cap, they have something like 130 or 125 million in cap space in 2023. They have basically the most cap flexibility of any team in the NFL. So they can basically rebuild this thing on the fly pretty quickly, I think, utilizing that cap space. They have 2 first rounders next year. They have 1 first rounder this year. So look, they have the draft capital, they've got the cap space. And if they play their cards right, of course they have to do that, which is not a given whatsoever. If they play their cards right, like, things could turn around pretty quickly here. They got to figure out the quarterback situation, of course. But yeah, bottom line, I'm kind of fascinated to see how it goes. Like, not to sound like a totally over, like, spoiled brat, like, fan or whatever, but it had kind of gotten a little stale, with like the way the Seahawks play over the last like 4 or 5 years. And so, not that I'm like, I was on record, and I remain this way. I was always on record saying they shouldn't trade him. But now that they have, it's kind of interesting, I would say.
Well, first off, Ryan McDowell's in the house. What's up, Ryan? Yeah, and Danny, I think, to me, it just feels like Seattle wants to recapture that rookie quarterback contract magic that they had with Russ. If we make everything else on the team so strong, we only need a certain level of quarterback play to make this work. So and the AFC is where all of the talent is at the quarterback position is now anyway. So, maybe a complete team is the type of team that could get it done in the NFC in the next couple of years. Dave, I'm really glad you brought that up, because there's probably nobody more qualified to riff on the Seahawks than Danny.
I mean, I was literally writing about it today. I think an article will come up tomorrow. Is basically, I was going back and reading some like quotes from Pete Carroll early on in his career, or not early on in his career, early on in the Seahawks tenure. And yeah, you said it, like, he doesn't want a quarterback to throw the ball a bunch. Like, in his ideal world, he's a sicko, but in his ideal world, they're like throwing 25 times. They're getting turnovers on defense. They're making plays on special teams. It all comes together. It all fits together. It's the circle of, like, I forget what he says, the circle of something, the circle of power or whatever. It's like tackling, hitting, physicality, taking the ball away, protecting the ball. It's like all this stuff. And he like believes it 100%. It's the all-time great way to win in the NFL. And he like doesn't care that all the fans are like, look, man, can you please stop running on first and second down? He doesn't care.
It's chalkboard. It's chalkboard football from the 70s, but Pete Carroll is like 70, so it all kind of makes sense.
That's his formative years, man.
Yeah,
it's not changing now. Well, he is actually. I take that back. I think he is willing a little bit to change what they're doing defensively, like schematically, but like overall, like protecting the football, making it easier on your quarterback, running the ball, and like he's never going to go away from the idea, like, if you don't turn the ball over, like, the odds are that you're going to win. Like, he believes that 100%. He doesn't care how ugly it gets. He doesn't care how much it sucks to watch. If you don't turn the ball over, you're going to win. That's why they punt so much. That's why, all this stuff. He truly believes that. He's like a true believer in it. He's never going to change. And so, maybe this is the best way to like go about it, because if you're going to pay a guy $50 million a year and then not have him throw, what's the point in that? So I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
So if we think, though, about Metcalf, Lockett, other players, in this offense. Obviously, not knowing who the quarterback is makes it really hard to do.
Right.
But just from a ranking perspective, for the time being, until we know actually what shakes out there, do you think that dynasty managers need to lower the rankings on these receivers?
I mean, like with Metcalf a little, yeah. Like it's clearly going to matter. It's clearly a factor because he had a perfect quarterback with him. Now, they were never a perfect like volume passing team, of course, but like the style that Russell Wilson plays with, moonball, deep shots, extremely, extremely accurate. Like that was perfect for Metcalf, what his skill set gives you. So I think it's certainly it's not a positive. I wouldn't drop him down too much. I know that like some people were debating whether you take Cortland Sutton or DK Metcalf on Twitter the other day. And I'm like, man, Metcalf is still so good. Like he's still really, really good. I know that that it definitely helps Cortland Sutton with Wilson there. And I'm not like debating that, but like I still would have Metcalf way higher. So I think, it's one of those things where how far does he fall down? I think that's tough because we don't know the quarterback situation, but it's probably going to be a situation where it's a significant drop off. And with Lockett, especially, man, it's tough days for Lockett. Hopefully he gets traded like just for his dynasty value.
I kind of feel like one of them will. I don't know who it'll be. I saw plenty of Metcalf trade rumors the other day, and I think his contract. But next year's year 5, right? I think
2019. I
think next year would be his option year.
Metcalf doesn't even have one. He was the second round.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right. So it's just straight up next year.
Yeah. So
it's after year 4. Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's hard for me because I'm like, this is the type of player you want to trade for. If you're the Seahawks, because you're rebuilding or whatever, you're retooling. Don't say rebuilding. It's a bad word, but I don't know. I think it would make way more sense for them to trade Lockett because he's like 29 and whatever. But his contract is not that tradable. I think there's like 15 million in dead cap this year, so that's not great. But like maybe they'll just eat that and then like have the extreme roster flexibility going into 2023. That might make the most sense.
All right. Well, I have many more questions that I would like to ask, but we have to be respectful of Danny's time here. So
sorry, it's my son's fault. Blame Calvin. Gotta go watch Calvin.
Unbelievable, Calvin. But hey, before you go, why don't you let everybody know maybe some of the exciting things that you have going on, coverage they can expect for you to put out, and where they can find you?
Sure. The Ringer NFL Draft Guide at The Ringer. It's at nfldraft.theringer.com. I am the co-host of the Ringer NFL Show, which is a part-time show. It's actually during the regular season, the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, but right now it's the Ringer NFL Draft Show. So go check that out on Spotify or wherever. And then you can find me on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly. And I think that's about all. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming through.
Of course.
And we will look forward to getting you back sometime soon.
Absolutely. Would love to.
Thank you for listening to the RotoViz Fantasy Football Show. Send us questions at rvffshow@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at DaveCabanFF and at CPatrickNFL. Leave us a voicemail at 978-615-9214 and make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.